So we're now finishing up the Mishnah that we started on Daf Nun Amid Aleph, and we're up to Daf Nun Amid Beis. And we have another case where a man tried unsuccessfully to implement a Masechet Kiddushin. Subsequently, he sent Sivlonos, and we're not Choshish for Kiddushin. V'chein Katon Shekidesh. A man, or I should say a minor, gave a woman Kiddushin, and then after he became an adult, after he reached Bar Mitzvah, he sent her gifts. We're not going to say that he knew that his original Kiddushin was invalid, and now he's sending her Kesef Kiddushin. No, we're not Choshesh L'Kiddushin at all. We assume that he was under the mistaken impression that his original Kiddushin, when he was 12.9, was valid, and now he's just sending gifts. Utzricha. The Gemara wants to analyze why the Mishnah needs three different dinim. Number one, a man was Makadosh 2 women with 1 pruta. Number 2, a man was Makadosh 1 woman with less than a pruta. Number 3, a man was Makadosh a woman when he was a katan. The Yashmin and Shava pruta. If the Mishnah had only told me the case where he's Makadosh 2 women with 1 pruta, I would have said, why did he assume that the Kiddushin was valid? How did he come to fool himself? And the answer is because he actually dug into his pocket, took out a Shava pruta. If all he took out was a half a pruta, Ema, then I would say, Yodea she'ein Kiddushin tosim pachos mishava pruta. He realizes that, hey, I only gave her something that's less than a pruta, and now ki komashad sivlonos adait the Kiddushin komashad. He means to send a gift as kesef Kiddushin, and therefore I need the Mishnah to be machadish the case of pachos mishava pruta, because the Havamina was Adam Yodea she'ein Kiddushin tosim pachos mishava pruta, and the Kamash Malon is no, a man could make a mistake, and he thinks mistakenly that he gave her a valid Kiddushin, even though it was pachos mishava pruta. So Ramban asks, how could you assume that a man made a mistake and he thinks that you can mekadosh an isha b'shava pruta, when the Gemara says in Masechet Ksubos on Daf Ayin Gimel and Beis, Adam hamakadosh isha b'pachos mishava pruta, and then he was boel her, she needs a get because Adam yodea shein Kiddushin tosim pachos mishava pruta, and his kavan in the be'ilu was be'ilu shein Kiddushin. When our Gemara establishes, in order to explain our Mishnah, that he actually fooled himself into thinking that he was able to effectuate Kiddushin with a pachos mishava pruta. And the Ramban, because of this stira, comes to the conclusion that our Gemara is not saying that a person definitely knows. The Gemara in Ksubos is not coming to the conclusion that personally definitely knows, but biru she'ein Kiddushin tosim b'pachos mishava el mesupek u'b'dama. With regard to Siflonos, ein lochash l'Kiddushin kishem shelo choshash b'shas Kiddushin l'kadsha b'pruta kach ein choshish ata l'shloch Siflonos shem Kiddushin. The Yashmin Hani Tatigmar continues. If we only had these 2 cases of a man who was makadosh 2 women with 1 pruta, or 1 woman with a half a pruta, mishum de bein pruta de pachos mishal pruta lo kimlu leinshi. People are not experts; they're not bekiim in the din that you need only a pruta, and therefore he came to the mistaken conclusion that he can send us something for Kiddushin that's worth less than a pruta, and the Kiddushin is valid, and now he's only sending sivlonos for the purpose of a gift. Isn't it public knowledge that a katan is not capable, he doesn't have the halachic legal capacity to effectuate Kiddushin, and Ema, therefore we might think that now that he became bar mitzvah, kika mesharis sivlonos, Why is he sending her gifts? I died to the Kiddushin Kamashad. Now he's straightening out the record and he's sending her a kesef Kiddushin. Kamashmallah, no. People make a mistake. They think that the Kiddushin could be chal even the katnus, and therefore when he sends the Siflonos after he reaches Gadlus, it was not sent for the purpose of Kiddushin, but rather for the purpose of Matana. So the Ritva asks, how can you tell me that a person doesn't know that Kiddushay Katan are invalid? In Kol HaTorah Kula, the halacha is that we don't recognize the halacha, the legal, there's no legal recognition of the validity of a Maisa Katan. And the Ritva answers, Yodehu she'ein Kiddushin chalam Katan, ach savar shekshanasa gadol godlo, afa Kiddushin imo. He is of the mistaken impression that once he becomes a gadol, he doesn't need a new Maisa Kiddushin. Automatically, the original Kiddushin is chal now. Itmar, Rav Huna Omer Choshen L'Siflonos, V'chein Omer Rabba Choshen L'Siflonos. Our Mishnah clarifies that we're not choshesh, that a person who sends Siflonos, he sent to L'Shem Kiddushin. And Rav Huna says, well, let's start with Rabba. That's sorry. Rav Huna comes first. Rav Huna Mar Choshen L'Sivlonos. V'chein Omer Rabba Choshen L'Sivlonos. So now we have a Safek Kiddushin when a man sends a woman Sivlonos. What's the case? So the Rishonim explain that we're talking about a case of an Isha Shenish Adam Shenishtadech Ima Isha. They already had Shidduchim. So the marriage is set. He hasn't yet been Makadisha. Now with Choshish, perhaps when he sends her Matanos, what he meant is not just the Matana, but rather he meant it as Kesef Kiddushin, and therefore she needs a get. And if she would marry a second guy, she'll need a get from both Makadshi. Omar Rabba umosvina nashmaitim. Let's ask a kasha from our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, that we're not choshish for Kiddush. It's nothing. It's not valid. So if a man sends a gift to his mishudeches, then he doesn't mean to send it as kesef Kiddushin. Let's read the explanation that the Mishnah offers. He relied on the first Kiddushin. And therefore, now when he sends Sivlonos, all he has in mind is a gift. But in a case of a man who's had Shidduchim with a woman, but he hasn't yet been Makadisha, so he's not relying on any Kiddushin, we have to worry and concern ourselves with the possibility that now he's sending Sivlonos L'Shem Kiddushin. Ika Diamri, according to the second version, Omar Rabba Mina Minala. Rabba didn't ask a kasha from the Mishnah, but on the contrary, he quoted our Mishnah as a proof. Kiriktani Taima. Why is it that the Mishnah establishes that we're not choshesh that the Sivlonos is Kiddushin, and the Mishnah gives an explanation, Shemachmas Kiddush Rishonim Shal, because he already, in his mind, was Makadisha. So obviously he's giving her just a matana, but Hacha, in the case where he only had Shidduchim, Hacha, in the Mishnah, where he did have Kiddushin, he made a mistake, thinking that the Kiddushin was valid, and therefore now he's only sending her a gift. But Habi Alma, in a case where he wasn't Makadisha, then Havi Kiddushin, we should be choshesh that maybe he's sending the Sivlonos for Kiddushin. And the Gemara rejects it. V'abai lomi boykam. Abai thinks he can't prove anything from our Mishnah. It's possible that the Mishnah is using a derech which is called ein tzarech lom, or lomi boy. Lomi boy be alma de lo nachis l'tors Kiddushin klal. It goes without saying that if a man sends a gift to a woman after the shidduchim were made, he doesn't entertain in his mind the idea that he's sending it for Kiddushin. And there was never Kiddushin at all. And now the Mishnah wants to tell me, afilu hachne nachas toras Kiddushin, even in a case where he said areyat mekudeshesli, and he made an attempt to be Makadishim, and the attempt was aborted. Ema have a Kiddushin. Maybe there's room to argue that now that he's sending Sivlonos, he's trying to rectify what he messed up on. And therefore he's sending the matanos, not l'shem matana, but l'shem Kiddushin, mashmalan. That's what the Mishnah is telling me, that even in this case, where he already made an attempt to the Kiddushin, but it was a failed attempt, we still assume that he's not sending Sivlonos Shem Kiddushin, but rather he believes that his Kiddushin were valid. My havi lala. What's the final conclusion about Chayshin l'Sivlonos or lo Chayshin l'Sivlonos? Amar Papi Aser the Mekadshe b'Hadar Misabla. It all depends on what the minig hamakom is. In places where the minig is first to be Mekadesh and Isha, and then to send us Sivlonos. So we're talking about what in our language, but again, it's not halachic language, engagement. So a man sends a gift to his fiancée, and that's the minig hamakom. In such a case, right? I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. The word fiancé is very misleading because in halachic terms, there's no such thing as a fiancé. Either she's mekudeshes or not mekudeshes. If she's mekudeshes, she's an eshes ish. But there was a minhag in certain places that after the Kiddushin, he hasn't yet taken her into the chuppah and consummated the marriage. He sends her gifts. And if that be the case, Chayshinon, the fact that he's sending gifts indicates that he already married her. But in another place, the Mesabli v'Hadar Mekadshe, that they send gifts to a fiancé, now I could use that word because it's a non-halachic word, and then later on he's Mekadisha, lo Chayshina. We're not going to be choshish that the fact that he's sending her gifts is proof positive that he already married her. The Gemara asks the following kasha: Mekadshe v'Hadar Mesabli pshita. If the minig was to send Sivlonos after the Kiddushin, then pshita, it's pashut that if a man sends gifts to a woman, we have to assume that he married her. So why did Rav Papa have to tell me this? So tzricha the ruma mekadshe v'Hadar mesabli miut mesabli v'Hadar mekadshe. Most of the people in that area will send mataros after Kiddushin. Miut would not. Maybe we should rely on the miut. And this man belongs to the miut that sends gifts before the marriage, and therefore he doesn't have any intention with these gifts of Mekadesh or Kamash Malon. No. We're going to say that he was Noe Kerov Anshe Makom, that first there's marriage and then there's Matanos, and therefore we be choshesh that if he sends her gifts, it must be because he married her. Boy, mine Rav Achabar, Rav Huna me Rava, if Adam saw that a man is holding on to a stark suba with the name of so-and-so, should we derive from that the conclusion that he certainly married him? Are you going to tell me that because he's prepared a ksuba, which he's going to give her after the Kiddushin, we have to assume that he already married her? My havi Allah, how do we paskin on this question? Omar of Ashi be asim nekachivadu kasvi ksuba chayshina. If the local custom is that a man marries a woman and then only then he writes a shtar ksuba, then we have to assume if he's holding on to the shtar ksuba that for sure he was makadisha. However, if it's a makom, a different minhag, where the local minhag is kasvi v'hari mekadshe, that they write the shtar ksuba up front even before the Kiddushin, and they prepare the shtar ksubas lo chayshinon. We don't have to assume, therefore, the fact that he has already a shtar ksuba in his hands that he married her. If the minig is that first he's Makadish and only then he writes the shtar, then it's pashut that this shtar ksuba is proof positive that he already married her. So why do you need to tell me this new din? Lo tzricha. When do I need this din, this chiddush? To lo shchiach safa. It's not always easy to get a hold of a sofa. They're not always available and accessible. I might think that nizdami lo sofa, and it was before the Kiddushin. And even though the minig is not to write a ksuba before Kiddushin, but in this particular case, maybe he wrote the shtar ksuba before the Kiddushin. Why? Because he got a hold of his sofa, and that's not always so available. So he was mamayer prematurely to write the shtar ksuba before, even though he wasn't Makadish, before he was Makadish. Therefore, the fact that there is a shtar ksuba doesn't really prove that there was Kiddushin. Kamash Malan, here's the Chiddush. We're not going to say such a thing. We're not going to create that suffix that maybe he found the sofer and he prematurely had the ksuba written, but rather we're assuming that he was noe k'minig anshe hamakom, that they have Kiddushin first and only afterwards they write the ksuba, and therefore we're going to have to be choshesh for Kiddushin. And now we get to the Mishnah here on the bottom of Daf Nunam and Beis. Samakadish Isho Bita. A man marries with one Harei Shtechem Mekudoshos Li, Rashi says, to a woman and a mother. Obviously, there's an Ervi can't be married to both a woman and her daughter. Or Ishvachosa to two sisters. Ain't a Mekudoshos. There's no valid Kiddushin. Maisa, there was a story. Bechamish Nosh, there was a group of 5 women, Ubahen. 2 out of the 5 were Shtei Achos. Liket Adam Echad Kalkola Shel Te'enim. He gathered together a sal of Te'enim. V'shalahen Hoisa. V'shel Shvius Hoisa. So even though they were Te'enim that belonged to these women, but it was Shvius. And in Shvius, we have a halacha of Hefker. And therefore, he can take hold of these te'enim and be mekadosh and isha with these te'enim. Omar, he said, "Harei kulchem mekudoshos liba kalkol azu," and there's enough of a shalom pruta for all 5 women, but 2 of them are sisters. Kivla akas mihen al yedei kulan. One of the 5 women came forward and played the role of a shliach on behalf of the other 4 women. The Kiddushin is only chal on the other 3 women, but not with regard to the 2 sisters. And the Gemara asks me, how do we know that you cannot be Makadesh 2 sisters together at one time? Gemara is going to reject this, but the Isha lachosa lo sikach litzra. Lo sikach is understood as invalidating the Kiddushin, and Isha lachosa means 2 sisters. HaTorah Amra b'shosha nasu tzara zu azu lo yehelo lekutha. That if there are 2 sisters that would be married to one man, and that makes them sorrows, the Kiddushin is not valid. Afilu bi'achasmi. Amalei Rava says if the pasuk is addressing a case of Makadosh Te'achios b'vasachos, Hainu d'chsiv in the Parsha Barayos. It says that if he has a relationship with the sister of his wife, then he's chayv kares. But now you're telling me that he married 2 sisters at the same time, and the Kiddushin is not valid. How can it be chayv kares? Elam Rava. We're going to have to assume that pasuk in Vayikra Yudches is not referring to Makadosh Tei Noshim, but rather Krov Azecher Zeh. he married two sisters, one after the other. And with regard to the second sister, there's an Iser Kores, because she's a Chosishno. Then now we're back to our question. So what's the source of our Mishnah? If a man marries two sisters simultaneously, the Kiddushin is not tofes in any of them. It's not a suffix. And the answer is misvara, based on the principle of Rabbah. Kidder Rabbah, the Omer Rabbah, kol she'eno b'zecher, ze'afilu v'sachas eno. If a man can't marry one sister and then the other sister, then there's a contradiction between the two Kiddushins. And therefore, vasachas, if he tries to marry both sisters simultaneously, that blows up the Kiddushin, it's not chal. Gufa, Omer Rabbah, kol she'eno chal, b'zecher ze'afilu v'sachas eno esvei abaye. And here we look on Daf Nun Aleph, and we have a Tosefta Masechet Tamai that Amar b'maser peirosov misukonin v'mai nema kol she'eno chal b'zecher ze'afilu v'sachas eno. So now we have the case of a person who was mafresh ma'aser rishon from his peiros, but he was mafresh more than 10%. And the question is whether or not that afrosha could be mafkia and matir the isa tevel. And the Tosefta says peiros of misukonim. However, masros of mekul kolim, the meiser itself is mekul kol. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, this is what we'll pick up. We'll pick up tomorrow. Okay, then. Wish you a good night. Yeah. We're set. I didn't know the Rebbitzins already made up. Okay, so we'll work out the time for the